So, hi everybody, welcome um, to our seminar. This is an extra session we have this week, and we have the pleasure to have with us Dr. Yenifer Angarita Arenas. Briefly about Dr. Angarita Arenas, she's currently a postdoc at the Division of Astronomy and Plasma Physics at the Chalmers University of Technology in Sweden. Yenifer did her master in physics and astronomy at the University of Leeds in the UK and obtained a PhD from the Radboud University in the Netherlands. During the PhD and also now as a postdoc, she focused her studies in the galactic magnetic field and local interstellar medium using starlight, polarization, and all kinds of tracer of the galactic environment. So thanks for being with us today.
So thank you very much for the presentation. First, I want to check if people online hear me well. This volume.
Yes.
Yeah, that's good.
Great, thank you. Okay, so yeah, thank you again for this invitation. This is very nice to be here first time and to present my work, of course. As it was said, I was a PhD student at Radboud University, so basically I'm going to show part of the work I did there with Maraki Haverkorn and Claudia Rodriguez, who is right now in Brazil, in Sao Paulo. So here you can also see some of my collaborators, like Antonio Mari Magalhães, Joseph Verstek, which also is a recent PhD student at Radboud, and Reinaldo Santos Lima, also Vanswell programs, and Koji Kyabawata, which is in Japan. So I'm going to talk today about the galactic magnetic field tomography in the spiral arms using optical and near-infrared polarization measurements. So I should have connected this. Now I'm trying to pass the. Okay, so here is a quick introduction of starlight polarization that I'm going to make. After that, I will talk to you a little bit about the methods I use to perform this polarization tomography using starlight polarization. Basically, I use two methods, which are deviation inference of starlight polarization in one dimension. Probably some of you already know about this method developed by Vanswell programs. And Gaussian mixture models, which is basically a clustering algorithm. And in order to do this depolarization, we have optical polarization measurements from the interstellar polarization survey, which I will explain a little bit more in detail. And also we use some data from the galactic plane infrared polarization survey, also known as GTIPS. And finally, I will show you some results of this tomography, well, because of the time, at least on one of the fields that we study. So quickly, a very broad introduction of starlight polarization and how we can use the starlight polarization to study the interstellar medium and the magnetized interstellar medium. So in this medium, we have dust grains that can be elongated, and there is also intergalactic magnetic fields, interstellar fields, and these grains, elongated grains, will rotate with this magnetic field with the smallest ready aligned with the magnetic field. So the light of background stars will cross this magnetized dusty medium and will become linearly polarized. So the line, the polarization that we observe will have a direction, which is basically the plane of the sky direction of this magnetic interstellar magnetic field. And we have an intensity which has information of this dust that align with the magnetic field, and also information of the magnetic field itself. So in this way, we can trace back all these properties of this magnetized medium. So because there is not just a single structure, or the dust is not just constantly distributed in this medium. There could be different structures along the line of sight in the path lane of this light, and the different structures can have different properties of or different magnetic fields. So the final polarization that we observe will be a sum of contributions of all these structures along the line of sight. So this is basically the principle that these methods, like the Bayesian inference of starlight polarization, uses. It takes into account that we can have these different contributions along the line of sight, and because we can observe different stars at different distances, we can somehow decompose these contributions. So if we have, for instance, the stars in between these clouds, and we know the distance to this cloud, to these stars, so we can know the properties of the foregrounds and then subtract this from the background structures. That's basically what this method does, using the polarization properties such as the QU Stokes parameters that changes as you go from the observer to the star. If you encounter more dust, then this Q and U with distance will show these changes in polarization. And also uses the parallax information, which is basically the distance to the star. So it builds a likelihood of for each star of being in front or behind each of these polarizing screens. In this case, the method is assuming that each of these clouds is a screen that polarizes the light, is a flat screen that polarizes the light along the line of sight. So it builds for each star a likelihood like this. And then with all the information of all the stars, all the observations we have, we can construct find the properties of each of the intrinsic polarization properties of each of the clouds and the distance for each of the screens. So this method has been successfully applied to different studies. I'm going to show you just one of them here, which is large region and high latitudes. This is from the work of Pelgrims et al. 2024. And they basically, at this very large region, which is about 3 degrees wide, they have several observations. The QU as a function of distance modulus in this case. This distance modulus is built with inverse parallax. So this QU shows this step, this change at certain distance, demonstrated the presence of some dust that is polarizing the light in this particular place. And so they made this analysis for using small beams across the fields. And so in that way, they found out that there is at least 2 or 3 clouds along the line of sight in this region, with in which the polarization and so the magnetic field properties changes. For instance, in the rightmost clouds, you can see the polarization intensity as the colored background, and the orientation of the magnetic field on the plane of the sky. So you see that from one cloud to the other, the intensity of the polarization increases, and also the orientation of the magnetic field changes. Okay. So the second method that I used is the Gaussian emission models, which is a clustering algorithm that basically relies on the expectation maximization process, in which very simple, you choose features of a data set, like for instance, the QU parameters and the distance. So the algorithm will start to look to fit the data into groups that share properties in this 3-dimensional space, or the number of dimensions that you choose. So the downside of this method is that it doesn't consider errors within this fitting. It just takes the information that you gave in Q, U, and distance, and then it starts looking for groups within these 3 parameters. So clustering algorithms has been applied before by Berset et al. In different line of sights in the Coalsack region. We have here 5 fields, well, at least 4 fields within the Coalsack. The contours in the middle plot is the CO map in the Coalsack. And different markers show the interstellar polarization survey fields that we have, so optical polarization that we have within this region. And for each region, we show the histogram of the polarization angle. In some fields, it looks like bimodal. It looks like we have multiple components. So we study this with clustering. We try to cluster this data in QU distance space, and at least in 2 fields, we were able to disentangle at least 2 components, to find 2 components. What the nearby component, which is the red in the left, in the right, which is the group of stars that belong or have information of the Coalsack region in the foreground, and the blue is the group of stars that are showing a different dust cloud that is polarizing the light at the distance of approximately 1.5 kpc, which is approximately the Sagittarius Carina. Okay, so what about the observations? So we, as I said, we have the interstellar polarization survey. This is a relatively old survey, but the data is very recent produced. We have here 38 small regions, small as 0.3 degrees per size, more or less, pointing towards the different spots in the southern sky that are mostly diffuse. So it's the very general ISM. And all together can have around 10,000 high quality measurements with signal to noise above 5. So with this data, we also, which was published by Berset et al. 2023, we also include Gaia distances and V1 extinction. And so because in the tomography, we want to use not just optical, but also infrared polarization. At least 3 of these fields around here overlap with the galactic infrared polarization survey that I'm going to show. So this is more or less how each of the IPS fields looks like. They're very small, but they are very dense in high quality data. Okay, so as I said, we also query some data from GPIPs. It extends in a very long stretch within 1 degree of galactic latitudes, but we only choose regions of 0.6 degrees per size that are centered in our fields of view. So we can have optical polarization and also infrared in the same region. And we cross-match it with the Gaia early year 3 distance catalogs. So this is more or less how the field of view looks like. Here you have the optical polarization from IPS in white vectors, and the black vectors are the GPIPs infrared, near infrared polarization. We also compare here with the mighty field orientation as the polarized thermal dust emission shows, which are the white texture. And you see that mostly in the 3 fields, most of the structure kind of agrees with starlight polarization, except in certain regions. For instance, in this region C50, which is the one that I'm going to talk about today, some vectors go very different as the plan mighty field orientation. Yeah, so before this trying to proceed with this polarization tomography, we first compare our data sets to see how, if they are tracing similar or different, very different properties along these line sets. We cross-match these IPS and JPIPS data sets. So here I'm showing the stars, only the stars that have both optical and infrared polarization measurements. And in this comparison, I'm showing here the polarization maps. So you see that they broadly agree on the orientation of the magnetic field. And of course, polarization, optical polarization, which are actually the orange vectors, are bigger in intensity by an order of 2 or 3 than the infrared polarization. Unfortunately, in this field, we don't have too much overlap between JPIPS and the IPS. We'll go one step back. So we reached the limit of JPIPS observations here in the galactic latitude. So we only cover at least 1/3 or half of the IPS field, unfortunately. But it's still a good comparison because we can see the a little bit bigger picture of what is happening in the surroundings.
The IPS observations are both in the R band or in the V band?
This observation, the JPIPS observation
No,
is
the IPS, not the
IPS V band.
V band.
V band, yes. So, yeah, so when I said optic is V band, and when I said near infrared is H band in GPS. Okay, so in this first quick comparison, so remember for each star, we have both measurements here. And we compare the ratio of optical to near infrared polarization degree as a function of distance. So as you see here, despite the big errors of the measurements, we see a very broad, constant trend along the line of sight, which means that basically, despite the number of clouds that they have been counting along the line of sight, these two measurements are showing very similar polarization properties of these structures. And the ratio is always between 2.5 and 3, which is very consistent with Cercasculo and what other observations have shown when they compare this in the whole sky. Also, comparing the polarization angles, this is the infrared, the difference between the near infrared and optical polarization orientation. And is roughly constant along the line of sight as well. You may see a kind of a small offset, but because of the errors and the spread of the data, this is basically consistent to 0. So the difference between the two observations is very, very small. It's basically 0. If this will be different, then it will tell something of these structures different from the different properties in both wavelengths of these structures. But in this case, we are seeing that rather they are crossing just a single cloud that has similar properties in infrared and optical, or multiple clouds that have these similarities. But as we will show in the tomography analysis, that's the last one is the case. Okay, so in order to show this polarization decomposition, I will start showing the results from VISP. And as I said, I will focus only on one of the fields because, well, basically because of time. In this field, that even though we have few data from JPIPS, we have very interesting trends in polarization with the optical measurements. So we want to know if in the tomography analysis, we can also determine where these differences come from. So here are the results from BISP using only optical polarization. BISP found that the model of 4 clouds is the best that fits our observations in this field in particular. So in the left plot, we have Q, U, and the optical extension density, the three as a function of distance. And we see the vertical lines and the shaded areas are the determined distance and uncertainties of distance of these clouds. So we see, by eye, we see certainly that there are some QU that show significant changes along the line of sight, but also there are some places where there is not very obvious these changes, and the different methods are very consistent in showing that there is a cloud there or some important change in polarization in this particular region. In the right, you will see the distance distribute the PDFs of the distance, and as you see, the one of the very nearby cloud is very broad and is basically going from between the priors. It spans between the priors. And this is because we don't have enough zero polarization measurements in nearby that constrains the distance and the properties of this cloud. So basically we are relying here on the priors that we include that are based on the information that we have from the local bubble wall. Yes. So that's basically why this distribution is like this. But for the other three, the two intermediate and the far distant cloud, we see very nice distributions showing this different screens. When we use the infrared data, we have even more problems in the nearby ISM because we definitely lack of measurements. So this foreground cloud can be the entire split of the local arm perfectly. But in the far ISM, we have enough data, even the measurements that are farther away that we can detect with the optical observations. So both observations are actually complementary because with the optical polarization, we can trace them better than nearby ISM, and with the infrared polarization, we can trace better farther ISM, and we can constrain the properties of this distant cloud, which is very consistent also here with optical. If I made, okay, so first there is something important to take into account here is the fact that BISP relies on the parallax to calculate the distance of these clouds and to calculate the likelihoods of the stars and clouds. And this is fine as soon as you use high latitude line of sights, or at least line of sights that are not very extended. Because as soon as you go to the galactic plane, as I'm doing here, you see in the rightmost plot, the inverse parallax as a function of the photogeometrical distance from Rayleigh electrons. So the relation between these two measurements start to deviate from the linear relationship. As soon as we go farther from 1.5 to kpc, this is not real. So this distance that we found with BISP is, these distances are biased by this fact that we have a lot of dust, a lot of extinction, and these measurements from Gaia are not very good. So we have to fix it somehow. So a quick fix that I found was to basically take all the observations that we have, compare with Weyler-Jones photogeometrical distance, which are corrected by this extinction, and fit this model. And then with this model, we can correct the distance that we found from BISP, basically. Okay, so with these distances, you can, we basically make clean cuts of the data to see the orientation of the magnetic field. I have to say here that in this first work, we use the line of sight integrated results from BISP rather than actual intrinsic polarization measurements. And that's because we wanted to compare with the other methods, which are the cluster, which is the clustering, which is basically giving us line of sight integrated solutions. So In this case, we made this clean cut at these distances and showed the stars that are behind each of these clouds. And this is the starlight polarization orientation or the magnetic field orientation. So you see that as we go farther and farther away, the orientation basically starts to change, especially in the distant cloud. It turns very close to the galactic plane. In the center, you see the average vector, the average magnetic field orientation as observed by Planck. So we see that as we go farther, the starlight polarization starts to align with Planck observations. But you still see, like in this second intermediate cloud, you still see some vectors that also, they're like no well separated, let's say, from one component to the other. I mean, some orientations that looks like it should belongs to the distant cloud. So that's because of this clean cut, this assumption that we have this screen, very thin screen separating the two components. And this method is not very good. Basically, it's not designed to detect these variations with plane of the sky components across the field of view, I mean. In the infrared, we have we have less data in this region, but I'm showing this small square, which is the size of the field of view from RBS, which is the one in the top. So you can see that they're more or less consistent as well, especially for the distant cloud. Remember that with infrared, we are more likely to be constraining the distance cloud. Okay, so for the results in the clusterings, again, we are showing here the optical polarization. The Stokes parameters U and Q as a function of distance, and also, again, the dust profile, the dust density profile for comparison. The vertical lines are the distance of the clouds that we found with BISP, and the red dashed line shows the corrected distance of these clouds, which you see that is the correction is bigger as we go farther away. And so the colors represent the different components, the different Gaussian components that the method found. And again, they are very consistent between one method and the other. However, in the very nearby ISM, because of the very few stars that we have there, this method really struggled to find this very nearby component. When we go to the infrared, well, things becomes a little bit more complicated, because as we saw, we are basically tracing just the distant ISM here. But with infrared, we have even more distant stars that we cannot observe with the optical polarization. So we probably are tracing more structures. This method seems to be tracing another structure. But we have to be very careful to interpret this kind of results at these distances. First, because, well, GPIPs has very large errors themselves in the observations. And second, at this distance, the errors in distance as well are very large. So we have to be very careful. So we are not sure if this is another component or is just the method of struggling to find more than one component. However, when we compare here in the bottom, we compare the orientation, we see that definitely is showing something that is very irregular and is very close to the galactic plane as well. In the top, we see the different groups of stars, how the method separate the groups, show also that it separates better the different contributions, especially in the intermediate cloud, between the intermediate cloud and the distant cloud, which let me recall the plot. Sorry, I go back a little bit. Here with this, that was a little bit difficult because of this sharp cut between the different contributions. If we have between one component and the other, this is what is going to happen. However, in this, in the cluster, in the station between groups is different. is basically choosing a difference along the line of sight and also a little bit across the field of view, which is struggles to cannot do that. So yeah, so we have a cleaner separation with 3 components, and they are very consistent also with the other results. So to summarize here, this part of the tomography. I'm plotting here the 3-dimensional dust model of Vergely et al. So this is the bird's eye view of the local galaxy. So we have at 0, 0, we have the sun, and the galactic center is towards the right. And so we have the local arm, the split, and the Radcliffe wave. And if we zoom into this very nearby region, we have the local bubble. The local bubble wall, so we have this marker showing our line of sights are the yellow, green, and red. And the markers show the different screens. So in the nearby, of course, they are going to be consistent with the local bubble wall, partially because we choose the priors are for that particular region, but also our measurements are starting to be consistent with this, even though they are few. The first intermediate cloud for the 3 fields are very consistent, and they are basically showing the limits of the dust that basically is contained in the split. This is towards the Aquila Rift. And for some fields, we found the second intermediate clouds, which are basically within the interarm region. Probably some dust is still there in this particular regions, especially for this red point here. And the distant clouds, as you see, the squares are very consistent with the location in the dust of the Sagittarius arm. We also show the line of sight of the work of Dewey et al. They use a field with optical polarization as well to do tomography analysis in the Sagittarius arm particularly. And they found different screens with different orientations of the magnetic field, and the location of these screens are still consistent as well with our work. Yeah, so, and this, I'm sorry, I'm here just showing the results from the optical polarization because otherwise it will be very messy. But the near infrared polarization, at least also in the distant ISM, will be very consistent. So finally, we compare our measurements of the starlight polarization, both optical and infrared. We compare them with the polarized thermal dust emission from Planck. Basically, in this is the same field I was talking about. We use the polarization angle observed with starlight polarization, and we make the difference with the polarization angle of thermal dust rotated 90 degrees. And so we show this difference as a function of distance. And as you can see, again, with optical polarization, which is the gray dots, we are tracing the nearby ISM, and we are showing the big difference that we observe in this particular field with Planck. And as soon as we go further, the near infrared polarization, which are the orange triangles, start to agree more with the orientation shown by Planck, which means that this orientation across these different screens, you see here, the vertical lines are the screens that we found with WISP. In the split of the local arm and the local bubble and all these structures, they disagree with Planck. They vary, the magnetic field varies a lot. And as soon as we reach the Sagittarius arm, it starts to agree with Planck observations. And this is also confirmed by the projected radius statistic you can see at the top. For optical and for infrared, this statistic basically measures the relative alignment between the vectors. So below 0 is relative. There is alignment is basically parallel, and below 0, the alignment is perpendicular. So we see that in the nearby ISM, this relative alignment is close to 0, even sometimes negative. And as we go farther away, the relative alignment increases. And this shaded area shows the maximum and minimum value that we can obtain with this statistic under these observations with these errors. Okay, so I think I'm going maybe too fast, but because I reached my summary slide and it's still too much time, but that's good because we can have many questions. So in this presentation, I show you polarization tomography analysis that we perform across galactic arms. We use optical and near-infrared polarization measurements, and I show you how complementary these two observations can be very useful to trace both nearby and distant ISM. We found these different structures along the line of sight in the local bar wall, in the split of the local arm, in the Sagittarius arm. And we showed that this magnetic field in this structure varies a lot along the line of sight. Also, in this work, we test these two different methods. We found pros and cons of these methods. And so at some point, both are consistent on the results, but also complementary to each other. With BISP, we can have the intrinsic properties of the clouds themselves, and also the line of sight integrated information. And more importantly, it takes into account the errors of the measurements and find the distance of the different clouds. However, it assumes that the cloud is a thin screen, and also it can only try to find changes in Q and U as a function of distance. It cannot find, it basically struggles with changes across the field of view, which is also important to figure it out. Meanwhile, the clustering algorithm, well, the downside, as I said, it doesn't use the errors, and it doesn't found actually a distance to the cloud, but it can actually separate better the components, the different components, not just along the line of sight, but also on the plane of the sky. So yes, plenty of work is still to be done to find a single tool, at least, that can account for all these issues. And yeah, but I think so far we are doing very good. And yeah, so that's all that I wanted to say today. And thank you very much again. I'm happy to take your questions.
Thanks. I already see one hand up. Nikos, can you hear us?
Yes, yes. Thank you very much for the presentation. Honestly, I've missed some parts because I'm observing at the same time. I just wanted to ask you about the difference that you mentioned in the between the infrared and optical polarization observation. So if you could go in your last slide, I think, before the summary, I mean.
Yes, I'm trying to go.
Yeah, here. So so you mentioned that the infrared data trace the dust that is farther better, while the optical data traces better the dust that is near, or something like this, right? Could you elaborate? I'm not sure I have gotten that part.
Yes, thanks for the question. Yes, I will be a little bit more clear on this. And this is because with optical polarization, we can detect the stars up to, as you see here, 2, maybe 3 kpc, and some regions could be even farther away, depending on the region. But we have more stars detected in the nearby ISM. So that's why we can trace better all the properties of the magnetic field. Whereas with the near infrared polarization, we don't have so many detections nearby. Most of the stars that we observe in near infrared are farther away, beyond 2 kpc or 1.5 kpc.
Yeah, I understand. That's because they are very reddened, right?
Yes,
So even so, the stars that are farther and that are measured with the infrared polarization here are still affected by the clouds that are in front, right? In the
yes,
nearby clouds.
yes.
So the position angle that you're measuring here is is a is a is the combined effect of all the clouds, right?
Yes, that's
Okay. So and here, if you are comparing, sorry, with Planck or what is
yes with Planck.
okay? So uh, so presumably Planck should also be affected by
Yes,
this, right?
that's correct.
Okay. Right. So the positional angle you're measuring for the infrared is not okay. Okay. Right. Thanks a lot. So I think as I said, I've missed some parts because I'm observing. So are you gonna be in the institute in the next days?
Yes, I will be tomorrow. And then
Okay. I need to rewatch some parts and then I can come find you and discuss more. Very interesting work. Thank you.
thank you. Yes, I have another.
Why the stars in near infrared are missing nearby stars? Is it a feature of GPX because they are situated or something?
I think both situations, I think they are too faint to be, and polarization is too low to be detected first. And second, also the signal to noise of GPX is also very low.
Well, but we're nearby, where should be greater.
From polarization.
Polarization.
Because the column is low.
Is low, yes, second. Yes,
So
yes,
is
please.
there
No,
So since we have time, would you like to show us the other lights on site?
yes, of course. Oh, I think I have to stop the presentation and jump. So I will show you one in which okay, this one in particular is it was a complicated case. I think both methods really struggle to find the screens because we have a line of sight with a magnetic field that does a curve in the field of view. So definitely BISP cannot distinguish these changes on the field of view. So it's trying to find these changes along the line of sight. So we see here QU as a function of distance again. And it's quite similar to the situation that we have before, right? So in the distance, especially in the farthest ISM, we see a clear change, but this change is like in the same range of distances. It's not happening, let me show you with this. It's happening across all U's and Q's in a single distance, more or less. So it's something happening just there. But perhaps because this is optical, we thought, well, maybe it's because with optical, we can just go here. We cannot go farther. Maybe we are starting to see this change happening smoothly, and farther away, maybe then it will flatten at certain value, right? So with infrared, however, we didn't clarify that very well. Again, we have this change more or less at the same distance, consistent here, but we don't see clearly because of the error bars as well. We don't see clearly this flattening, so it's still happening at certain distance. Yes, so that's in this field is complicated. So we have this loop, and apparently when we, let me see if I, yes, I have here the polarization vector maps. So we see that the loop basically happens at all screens. The loop is happening always in each screen. So it's along the line of sight feature, but also kind of changes a little bit. So it's very complicated line of sight. I don't think with these two methods, we are actually finding a final result for this field. It's a very intrinsic field, intricate. But what we see, what I, for instance, observe sometimes we go farther with the infrared, is that there is a point like the node along, around which this loop happens, where we see very random orientation of the polarization and also very low polarization. So probably there the magnetic field is coming towards us. And that particular point is moving across the field of view as we go farther away. So it's like mutating along the line of sight. It's very complicated, but so it's not like a single screen perhaps, but a structure that is actually changing on the plane of the sky and along the line of sight as well. So yeah, and also I think I have also the result of the clustering. Let me quickly show you. In the clustering, it struggles to find again the nearby component, but it also detects this distant change, which is basically on the field of view rather than distance. Again, you can see it here in the bottom in the vectors. This is optical, and with infrared, actually, again, is finding more changes on the field of view. So we have this another component, this orange component, we cannot observe with optical polarization. First, because it's outside the field of view mostly. And second, because most of these stars are faint red stars that I didn't mention. I flag out those stars with BISP because those have issues in the parallax. And because we are using parallax with BISP, we have to take them off. In the parallax of these stars, faint red stars, makes them look like they are very nearby, but they are actually farther away. So it's when I show this plot, let me just go back quickly to the distant plot. Oh, this one. So those red faint stars are actually a tail of that appears here in this data set. Still, we have perhaps some of those stars here with the infrared, and it is affecting more the near infrared data, of course. But we have to take those into account because otherwise this it's a wrong parallax for those stars. But in the clustering, we can use them because we are using in the clustering the photogeometrical distance rather than the parallax. So they are well located along the line of sight, and then we can find this other component, which seems to be, yes, something very different. Here, probably an elongated structure, which is very localized in the field of view, but it has data along the entire line of sight. So it's localized here.
So you may I ask one more.
Yes.
Yes. In all your plots, you're showing this AV density at the bottom. And none of the structures actually correlates with any feature. I noticed right? The location of the cloud, right? In all of the examples you have shown, do not correlate with any particular feature in this diagram,
This
right? Why is that? I mean, what does that tell you about the
with, in this case, the nearby, well, I think is basically, oh, that was exactly the next one. This is basically the same information, but it's a view out of the entire local set. So here we see that it actually relates with the bigger structures. I mean, it's not a specific small cloud that is like a screen in front, but it's actually the most distinctive part of the line of sight that dominates this polarization. So in this case, here is the local bubble wall, and here is not a cloud here or here, but it's actually all the dust that is in between the local bubble wall and the H, if we can say, of the splits. This is the split of the local arm, and then this yes, correlates with different structures in the Sagittarius arm, but we don't know exactly which structures. Just determine this the Sagittarius arm, but it's yeah, it's not like here that, for instance, in the case of Louis, they found different clouds within the Sagittarius arm, but we could only trace at least one, probably the age of the, or close to the age of the Sagittarius arm.
Okay. And okay, last one.
Yeah.
Okay, so can you go back to your clustering algorithm?
Yes.
Well, yeah, there you compare the distances, right? So the red, you have assigned the distance, right? Do I understand correctly that the red dust lines indicate the distance of the cloud?
Yes.
Okay, so you do assign a distance in your clustering algorithm as well.
No, this is a comparison with the result of this. So
Well,
this
is the blue ones, right?
yes,
What is the red one?
the red one is the corrected by the model I made in
Oh,
using
okay,
this,
okay, now I think I understand, okay.
right?
Yeah.
So with the model comparing the inverse parallax with the photogeometrical distance, I modeled this
Okay,
with
I
our
understand. Yes.
using all the observations, both optical and infrared. And I model this, and then with this model, I correct. And this is actually the comparison that tells me that this correction is more or less fine.
Okay, I see, okay. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
Okay, one last question from online. I seen Amita wrote something in the chat. Said, hi, interesting talk. I have a naive question. How do you quantify the distance of the detected clouds using clustering algorithm and the uncertainty?
Yeah, exactly. That's my point. We don't.
Yeah.
We don't. The distance here are the ones that we can obtain with BIS. So that's why we say that both methods are complementary. They have different information at some point, but in general, they are very consistent.
But so you take your beam to be 0.6 degrees on the side, right? The size of the beam. You take this 0.6 by 0.6.
We don't have I mean, field of view is 0.6
Right, so,
degrees.
and you take the whole thing to be one beam, right? So this depends on the result, depends on the resolution you're using, right? So do you have enough stars, and could you, for instance, in the loop case where you have clear differences, right?
Yeah.
Could you split it in two?
Split. Yeah, we
You
thought
have
about
enough
it.
stars to still do this?
Yeah, we thought about it, and I think the answer is not. We don't have enough stars, unfortunately. Once you start being in the field of view, let's say, splitting into different small sections.
No, but even if you split it in half, I mean, you take it by eye, you can see the loop, right, forming in the sky.
Yes.
So how about you split it in exactly in where the bending is, right? So split it in two and see what happens, because the result of this depends on the resolution, right?
Yes.
So with better resolution, you can actually follow the whole, right, the whole loop.
It's an interesting idea. Probably it would be nice to try it.
But you need enough stars to.
Yeah, that's the thing. Maybe with optical, we'd be able to do that. You have more stars, but, I don't know, yes, we will have to try it. If the statistics are, you know.
Okay, so let's thank center again.
Thank you very much.